Number 3. Blood in the basement. It was just another day in the sleepy neighborhood of Willow Creek. At least that is what everyone thought, until a young mother discovered something terrifying while renovating her new house. The woman had purchased the home at an online auction for nearly 80% less than its market value, and she was convinced that it was simply a matter of giving the place a fresh coat of paint and some minor repairs, and then she would have a home that was almost worthless. But little did she know that there were much darker secrets hidden within the walls of the house. As she began removing the old carpet in one of the rooms, she noticed a stain on the wooden floor underneath. She tried to remove it with some cleaning products, but no matter how hard she scrubbed, the stain remained. In fact, it appeared to be getting worse. It looked like a dark blotch that resembled a human figure lying face down on the floor. But that was impossible. Nobody had been living in the house for years, and there was no sign of forced entry or any other indication that someone had been there recently. Determined to solve the mystery, the woman brought out the big guns, literally. She called in a team of forensic specialists who examined the floor with special equipment that could detect minute amounts of blood. Sure enough, they found traces of blood in the very spot where the strange stain had appeared. What was even more disturbing was that the house had been built in 1920, and the blood was not from a recent crime scene, but rather from the 1940s. With this new information, the police were able to narrow down the timeline of the crime and identify the possible victims. But as they dug deeper into the case, they uncovered a shocking conspiracy that went all the way to the top. It seemed like every lead they pursued ended up going nowhere. Every witness had a solid alibi, and there was no evidence of foul play. But the detective in charge refused to give up. He scoured through old newspaper archives and found a story about a missing person from the 1940s. The details were sketchy, but it was clear that the victim had vanished without a trace and had never been seen again. But why? As the detective pieced together the clues, he realized that the victim had been involved in a high-stakes poker game when he disappeared, and the winner of that game was none other than the owner of the house. At first, it seemed like a simple case of robbery gone wrong, but as the investigation continued, it became clear that there was more to the story. The owner of the house was not a small-time crook. He was a powerful mobster who ruled the city with an iron fist. The detective knew that if he wanted to get to the truth, he would have to go straight to the source. So he paid a visit to the mobster's son, who was now running the family business. The son was reluctant to talk at first, but eventually broke down and spilled the beans. His father had not won the poker game fair and square. He had cheated, and when the victim realized he was being swindled, he had threatened to expose him. That's when the mobster had him killed and buried in the basement. With this new information, the police were able to exhume the floorboards and find the victim's remains. The case was finally closed, and the neighborhood could finally move on from the shadow of the past. But for the mother who had bought the house, it was a nightmare that she would never forget. She had not only uncovered a dark chapter in the city's history, but had become part of it herself. Number 2. The Haunting of Hill House. In the heart of New England, there stood an old Victorian mansion known as Hill House. The house had a reputation for being haunted, and many had tried to debunk the rumors, but no one had ever stayed for long enough to find out the truth. For years, potential buyers had shied away from the property, believing it to be cursed. But one couple was not afraid of a little ghost. They saw the house as a fixer-upper, and they were willing to take on the challenge of not only restoring it to its former glory, but also uncovering the secrets of its past. They moved into the house with their 2 young children and began the long process of renovation. But they soon realized that they had bitten off more than they could chew. As they tore down walls and removed old furniture, they uncovered strange symbols carved into the woodwork. These symbols were not only bizarre, but also seemed to be ancient, suggesting that the house may have been used for dark rituals long ago. As the weeks turned into months, strange things started to happen in the house. Doors slammed shut, objects flew across the room, and disembodied voices echoed through the halls. The couple's children were the ones who experienced the most terrifying phenomena. They claimed to have seen ghostly figures roaming the halls and even interacting with them. The parents were skeptical at first, but as the activity increased, they began to worry for their children's safety. One night, the family was awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of screaming. They rushed to their children's room to find them sitting up in bed crying. The children insisted that they had seen the ghost of a little girl who lived in the house during the 1800s. The parents were terrified, and they knew that they had to do something to protect their children. They called in a team of paranormal investigators who used special equipment to detect any unusual energy in the house. What they found was shocking. The house was not only haunted, but the spirits were angry and vengeful. One of the investigators even claimed to have seen the ghost of a man who had been brutally murdered in the house during a robbery. With this new information, the family decided to leave the house and seek a new home. But as they packed up their belongings, strange things started to happen once again. Items began to move on their own. Doors slammed shut, and the children became increasingly frightened. The family called the paranormal investigators back to perform a final exorcism of the house. But as the ceremony reached its climax, things took a terrifying turn. The ghosts of the house became enraged and attacked the investigators. The family was forced to flee, and the investigators were left with no choice but to abandon their equipment and run for their lives. And still today, the house remains empty, a terrifying reminder of the evil that can sometimes linger in the most unsuspecting places. Number 1. The Ghost Train. The year is 1926, and a group of friends decides to take a train journey through the heart of the Scottish wilderness. They're excited to explore the remote areas of the country and discover its hidden beauty. But little do they know that they are about to experience something that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. As the train travels through the dark and winding tracks, the friends begin to hear strange noises. At first, they dismiss it as the sound of the train. But as time goes on, the sounds become more and more eerie. They hear the sound of footsteps, whispers, and even screams in the darkness. The friends try to ignore these sounds, but they quickly become more and more frightened. Suddenly, the train screeches to a halt, and the lights go out. The friends are plunged into total darkness, and they begin to panic. They call out for help, but there is no response. They hear the sound of chains dragging metal moans and feel a cold presence that seems to be all around them. Then they see it, a ghostly apparition that appears at the end of the train car. It's a horrifying sight that sends chills down their spines. The ghost is pale and translucent, and it seems to be dragging itself closer and closer to them. The friends try to run, but it's too late. The ghost reaches out its cold and skeletal hand and touches one of the friends. In an instant, the friend feels a surge of ice-cold energy that seems to drain the life out of him. The friends watch in horror as their friend S's body begins to stiffen, and his eyes roll back in his head. He collapses to the ground, and they can feel the icy touch of the ghost on their own bodies. They know that they are next. And as the ghost moves closer and closer to them, they can feel their own life energy draining away. The friends scream and thrash about, but it's no use. The ghost's icy touch is too strong, and they are powerless against it. Just when they think it can't get any worse, the ghost reaches out again and touches another one of the friends, and then another and another. The friends fall to the ground one by one, their life energy drained away by the ghostly apparition. The ghost train continues its journey through the darkness, carrying its ghostly cargo of souls that it has collected. And those who hear the sound of its whistle know that they should run and hide, because the ghost train takes no prisoners and leaves only death in its wake. Well, that's all for now. But if you want to hear more scary stories, stay tuned for more content.